Hey Travis, how are you?
Oh, really good. Thank you for joining us here today. I've got to know you over the last few months and learn quite a bit about Intellibus, and I know you have an initiative called the World Digital Governance. Can you elaborate on this initiative?
It's kind of very early right now. We've been in conversations. I've been on various phone calls with different founders of companies, some of the policymakers, regulators, attorney generals of different states and so forth, and mayors of cities. And the conversations broadly been around the need. Is
Mm,
there a need for governance around AI more specifically, but more broadly around the digital world that we live in? Increasingly, we live in a digital world. We are living in a digital world today where there's not just AR, VR, but a massive wave of artificial intelligence. So, in this wave of artificial intelligence, is there a need for some sort of governance? Because when we look around us, we see that a lot is happening, and it's happening at very rapid pace. And there's AI boomers who want to say that everything AI is going to solve for us, which may be pretty much true. And there's also AI doomers. Very recently, Jeff Hinton, one of the founding fathers of AI, left Google. And so we've heard that conversation. And of course, we've heard Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, talk about the fact that AI has great promise and at the same time, great peril. And we've talked
mm,
great world leaders like Mr. Elon Musk talk about the same thing. So we're living in a world where we're hearing both sides of the story. And so while there is great promise, there is obviously the potential of great risk. It's kind of like the nuclear powers that
yeah.
they came in.
Hmm.
And what did we do as society? We set up a regime where
Mm,
there was some governance and control. Nuclear power was great. It gave us a lot of power at very economical cost. It really helped. But at the same time, there was a lot of risk because the same technology could be used to create weapons.
yeah.
And we're kind of in that world today where AI has great power. It can probably cure poverty, hunger, take us to a better world. At the same time, it presents great risk because, the same AI could be weaponized.
Yeah, I love how you gave the reference of history there when we talk about nuclear weapons. And it's the great paradigm, right? How do you envision this governing body, or what does this governing body look like?
I would like to clarify that world digital governance is just a place for having conversation, creating a space for collaboration, space for really building consensus amongst organizations. So it's not a governing body. It doesn't have any mandate from any government in the world. It is not a regulatory body. It is simply a organization of individuals, like-minded individuals in the world, founders of companies, policymakers, regulators who are coming together all across the world, across 100 plus countries, and trying to create this space for conversation, a safe space
Okay.
where people can speak their mind out openly, have those tough and hard conversations around
Mm,
artificial intelligence control and governance, if any. The challenge there that we face today is that imagine this, picture it in your head, if 200 countries pass 200 different types of regulations around artificial intelligence, which are completely or even slightly different in nature, it would make business impossible for any startup or any company to do anything around artificial intelligence because now they have to account for 200 different pieces of regulation. So how do you handle that? And then at the same time, we want to ensure that people don't go amok.
okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So really, it's just your highest level collaboration, right? Who are the influencers? Who are the people that can make change? Who's willing to commit to these change? And then understanding the global perspective, right, of the real needs, not just for us or them or whoever, but all of us, right?
So I guess the question you're asking is who needs to be involved or who's
Yeah,
involved. I would say we can look at it in maybe 5 buckets. I call it the pros. I love poetry.
yeah,
Pros is essentially just an acronym. It starts with P for policy, R for regulation, O for ontology, S for standard, and E for ethics. So the idea is that you're bringing together policymakers. There's plenty of policy organizations across the world, right from CFR to the RAND corporations in the US and equivalent organizations in every country. There's equivalent regulatory bodies,
yeah,
and regulatory bodies, obviously, the governments at both the federal and the state level. There's standards organizations. There's obviously organizations like the NIST, and then there's organizations that like the IEEE and various other organizations have different mandates. And some of them specify data formats, some of them specify communication protocols, and so forth. So bringing a lot of that conversation together, the W3C is a body around the web standards, for example. And similarly, bringing together ontologists. Now, this may be a piece that a lot of us don't often think about ontology, and people wonder what ontology even is. Ontology, in essence, the simplest way, of course, the metaphysical definition of the word ontology is the meaning of life and so forth. But very simplistically, we can think of it as how we structure our data or how we model our data. And so there are people whose jobs are to enable these models, largely standards bodies. But then there are ontologists who sort of work with the standards bodies to define what that structure of data should look like. For example, we've obviously defined HTML and various other protocols for the web. Similarly, in the world of artificial intelligence, protocols for inter-AI communication and formats are being thought about and standards are being established. And then there's accountability question beyond that, because the question of ethics. For example, one of the big concerns that everyone's raising today is, and there's litigations and lawsuits, the concerns everyone's raising today is that the entire internet has been crawled, what is called the common crawl, data that is on the internet, public crawled data, public information on the internet, so-called public information, but several websites have copyrights and sort of policies saying do not scrape or do not take that data. Obviously, Common Crawl has done it in an ethical manner, but then this data has been then fed into AI engines. These AI engines are now producing new content. Yeah. This is why the writers strike and the actors strike and so forth, largely because people are wondering what happens to all the effort over the years and decades that they've put in. Obviously, the information is in the internet, so one can argue, oh, it's public, it's free, it's out there. But at the same time, not because you put an image on the internet, it becomes copyright free. So there's an ethics question. And so bringing in people who care about ethics.
I love that. I think it's both ethics and regulation, right? Was it written, in fact, by this person, a human, or was it, in fact, infringed on and used by someone else, right? So then that's regulatory. Definitely a policy needs to be in place to prevent that. So how can we monitor something like that?
So it's a hard problem. There is no easy answer here. But the hope of this effort is that as we start to have a conversation, some answers will emerge. Yeah. And at the first step where we are right now, the need of the hour is really to create these forums to have those conversations. And they're already happening. For example, policymakers are already having those conversations, but in the context of policy. Regulators are having conversations in the context of regulation. However, there is a need to bring it all together somehow. And that's the effort, really, around world digital governance.
Okay, so it really is just a coordinated effort of collaboration.
A coordinated effort of collaboration and driving some level of consensus. So we don't end up passing regulation and structuring policies which are vastly different around the world, which will make it impossible for anyone to do business and it will stifle innovation. So the purpose of world digital governance is necessarily to accelerate this innovation and not slow it down, but at the same time, responsibly.
Okay, I love that. So you mentioned accelerate innovation, but then you also talked about the collaboration of business or how we can enhance business if we had the right pros applied to AI. How do you envision those?
The question is, how would we, in an ideal world, have some sort of governance model around artificial intelligence or the digital world? In my head, I always think about simplification. I think of, if it is simple, then it's easy for everybody to understand. If it's simple and easy to understand, it'll be easy to implement and easy to do. So if we were to think of the world in very simple terms, the world could be thought of as a world powered by artificial intelligence, which has all our data in it, which is what is kind of happening with the AI engines. Public data is already in the internet. All the public data on the internet is already in an AI engine right now, or multiple AI engines right now. Additional data is being put in by humans. As humans converse with that artificial intelligence, they're constantly asking it questions. So more of what's in their head is going into the AI engines. And so the question becomes, how do you even see what's happening? So the first part of really governing is understanding what information an AI engine is taking in. So today, you train AI engines, you obviously provide input to it, you provide data to it. What is the data that's being provided? So understanding what that is, having a mechanism to then maybe remove bits and pieces of that data, say, oh, these people say, oh, this information is copyrighted, do not feed that. So have a mechanism to just control and manage what is okay or not okay to feed into an AI. And for example, if it's your private information, let's say you start to have a conversation with AI. Now, if that AI engine is taking all your knowledge, all your brain power, and then being used by somebody else with no regard or compensation back to you, that's tricky. So there has to be a mechanism that needs to evolve. Do we have all the answers? Obviously not.
Well, I think that, what's really cool is you gave that acronym, right? And as a military guy, I appreciate acronyms. It allows me to remember things much quicker. So you said policy, regulation, ontology, standards, and ethics, right? So we already have bodies that are doing these things, right? So who are those that could help you on this initiative?
I think who should join this conversation?
You're
I think
right.
that's the question. So really policymakers who are already in the business of or trying to define policy.
Is there any specific
So
policymakers
like I
that you?
mentioned some of those earlier, the RAND Corporation,
Yeah.
they mostly help define policy around not necessarily AI, but around national security of organization of governments and so forth.
And many of these they cross reference one another, right? So
Yes.
I mean, policy writers they have to address ethics, they
Yeah.
have to address standards,
Yeah.
they
And
have to
at
address.
WDG.org, very soon you'll be able to find a lot of this research that the WDG team is putting together. So they're making an inventory today. The team's making an inventory of what policies exist, what are the gaps in those policies, what other questions those policies need to answer that are not being answered today, and who needs to be involved. And so essentially, it's a research effort to start with, and then an effort to bring people together so as to bridge the gaps and then bring consensus.
Okay, I love that. So again, it's just the highest level collaboration. So WDG is also going to identify the gaps and then reach out to the people they believe can contribute to the cause.
Yes,
Can you tell me how is WDG set up today?
it's very early, as I'd mentioned. The idea behind WDG is it's a not-for-profit organization. It's set up with obviously some fiduciary board of directors who are responsible for the entity itself and the operation of it. The advisory structure that's being created around that will include policymakers, regulators, ontologists, standards bodies, and ethicists representation from all of these bodies. To start with, we're starting small with a handful of people, small working groups. But then obviously over time, these groups would expand to include people from all other countries.
Wow, this is quite the mission. I want to backtrack a little bit and just ask you a little bit about yourself. What has driven you to go on such a mission?
The journey of world digital governance in my own mind and in the hearts of the team that I've been working with started, maybe 7, 8 years ago, and we started with the idea of Big Parser Public. So we had built this platform called Big Parser. The idea was it was going to be an ethical AI platform. The platform would be a space where humans and AI can collaborate. It still exists today. It's a service. And we always had the option to do what OpenAI had done, to go crawl the internet or take the entire internet's data, feed it to an AI engine, run a set of models on it. The only reason we didn't go down that path was largely because there was an ethics question. What did we do? We amassed high school kids all across Northern Virginia and people all across the world who wanted to be contributors to open data, like people that, who have been contributing to Wikipedia. So we spent several years, almost a decade, with a large community of people collecting data manually. Obviously, it's a laborious, painful process. But then when you collect data manually, kind of how Wikipedia has been set up, then there's no ethics and copyright issues because the data is not then bound by database copyright anymore. And that's one ethical approach. And so we've been promoting that ethical approach for a long time. And the idea always with Big Parser was that we were going to take the Big Parser public data that was being collected, was public good, and we are going to make it a not-for-profit and spin it out, and it was going to stand alone on itself. And so WDG is sort of that opportunity for us to really, take that and put it out there for the world to consume and the world to understand that that's the effort that's been going on for over a decade.
Can you tell me some of the benefits that AI will provide in the future?
I think the promise and power of AI is truly transformative. We've all seen the sci-fi movies. We've seen the possibility. I'm a big sci-fi fan myself. I love the Marvel universe. No plug here for Marvel, but I love Tony Stark and the idea of Jarvis. I keep telling everybody about it. Wouldn't it be nice and cool if you had Jarvis and Jarvis would do everything for you? And so that's the promise for everyone. And we kind of all know that that's what we've been trying to do. The idea of the chatbot is, at some point, it can be your trusted confidant. It can answer all your questions and so forth. So we understand that part. And the power just kind of elevates from there. So I talk about the movie Transcendence. It shows a whole different level where, your biology can be transformed, right? So the power of AI is not just to be able to sort of create these artificial machines and artificial intelligence, but the power is to truly help us as humans transcend our biology and go to the next level. In all the effort that we've made over the last several decades with technology, we've come a long way. There's a lot that we can do today with technology that was just impossible. Today a doctor can operate on someone remotely halfway across the world through robotics and intelligence. Artificial intelligence presents a higher order of power now in the hands of everybody. And so the question is, will artificial intelligence become our co-creator? Some of us are afraid that artificial intelligence will take our jobs away, will, replace us, which is natural because every time a new technology comes, this happened, when there was an agricultural revolution or industrial revolution or a technological revolution in the internet. Every time technology comes along, people are afraid, oh, it's going to take our jobs away. Obviously, jobs go away, but new jobs get created.
That's right.
So Frederick Taylor, one of the great economists, once said that it's really about reskilling the economy. And it's the role of the government largely to enable that reskilling of workforce at large scale. So that's a big part of it. And the power of AI really is to truly transform our lives.
Right. Yeah, I love that you dialed in there on the biology part. I really think of the impact that COVID had on the world. How can AI contribute to medical benefits?
One of the big things when we talk about AI, and I talk with folks and world leaders all across the world, including chief product officers of companies, and you talk to them about the artificial intelligence question. The question almost always is, it's really about the data. It's not about AI. And the same question holds true when we talk about medicine. There's regulation in every country. United States has the HIPAA and various other regulations around healthcare data. Obviously, you don't want that data to be abused, to fall in the wrong hands, which is naturally the right thing to do, the ethically correct thing to do. But at the same time, there's power in unlocking that data to great human benefit. So the question then becomes, how do you do it responsibly? And that's where the true power of an organizational support that World Digital Governance provides is. So medical bodies have been trying to do that. Medical device providers have been trying to do that. Foundations and organizations have been trying to open that data and make that data available for public good. An organization like World Digital Governance facilitates that conversation, takes it to the next level, helps people understand the do's and don'ts and the pitfalls, creates a safe space for having the conversation. And then it's upon the standards bodies and the regulators and AI labs to do it responsibly.
The other thing I have in my mind, for those of you who don't know, Ed has a company called Intellibus where he consults large fintech organizations all across the world. And what I'd like you guys to know is a little bit more about him. So I want to ask you about your background with NYU, your time on Wall Street, and how you kind of pulled all this together, right? Because if we're going to get people to support you, we need to know more about you.
Yeah, honestly, it's not about me. And it's not about supporting me at all. You shouldn't do this if you want to support me. There are a lot of founders and investors and people that know me and people at NYU, organizations that I've worked with on Wall Street. And this is not me reaching out for help. So I want to be very clear. And this has nothing to do with Intellibus. I want everyone to understand that.
So we'll take all that out.
Yeah. No, that's fine. You can leave that right in because I want everybody to know that. Okay. I think it's important for people to understand that this is nothing to do with Intellibus. Intellibus is an enabler for World Digital Governance. It's not really the company is supporting it, it's individuals. Organizations are built a lot of times, which are not for profit, by purely volunteer effort. So bulk of the effort behind World Digital Governance is volunteer effort. So obviously someone has to spend some money to get things rolling. And that's where Intellibus is sort of enabling that journey a little bit. But really it's about individuals stepping in. The call to action really is to founders of companies, board members, C-level executives who have already made their exits, who made their money in life, who can afford to support a not-for-profit initiative. And the ask is very simple. We're asking people to contribute a very minuscule amount of money, $100 a month, which is probably half your lease of a very cheap car that you can find in America. And the idea is if you make that little bit of contribution towards the idea that could potentially, I wouldn't want to be so dramatic as to say save the world, but truly enable acceleration of rapid AI innovation and the promise of AI at the same time in a very responsible manner. So like climate change, 100 years later, we are not in deep trouble and there's no way to unwind that clock. Climate change, we had a reset. There was a COVID. 2 years later, we feel better. A lot of that, there was a bit of a reset due to COVID. Artificial intelligence may not give you that opportunity for a reset. It may be a one and done.
Right. What do you think some of the benefits AI can provide in the fintech space, financial space as a whole?
It's a bit of a long question, but I'll try to give a finite lens on that. The financial industry is purely based on data transfer. Back in the day, of course, the financial industry was a lot about commodities and physical goods, movement of gold and money and cash. These days, trillions of dollars of transactions happen at the click of a button. It's all digital transactions. It's all data. And we've seen how technologies like blockchain and Bitcoin have made a big impact in the currency space. Sovereign funds are still not supporting Bitcoin at a significant way. Not that I think artificial intelligence is going to take all that away or change that in a drastic way. That world is going to still continue to coexist in parallel. But certainly the adoption of artificial intelligence within organizations to enable and accelerate the rate at which fraud is managed and controlled. Today, fraud within payments internationally, international payments is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Managing fraud in that is a big piece. I would say it's a big missing piece right now, which could be drastically improved through artificial intelligence. The ability to offer the right financial products to the right investors is going to be a key. Almost every large organization that's in the wealth management space has announced an effort or has an effort underway using artificial intelligence. And if you were to think of artificial intelligence, it's a broad topic, very specifically a subset of that, which is called machine learning, which is a key part of a lot of what we are seeing today, with the foundational models. We've had that for a long time in the hedge fund industry. So hedge funds have been doing that for a long time. I think the financial industry will just continue to use machine learning how they've been doing it for several years, except they're going to apply it to a lot more areas that they weren't applying to today. It will create, obviously, a lot of disruption.
Yeah, it's all about the algorithm, right? And that financial control. I think the controller piece will be huge. The financial piece is more specific. It's easier to teach it numbers, maybe anything else. We're not going to argue about numbers for the most part, right?
Well, Travis, thank you for being here and thank you for being part of this journey. I'd love for the folks, trying to listen in to know a little bit about you. You spent 24 years in the Army and you're part of this effort of World Digital Governance. So I'm sure everybody would want to know what has prompted you to volunteer your time for this effort.
Yeah, so me, I joined the military at 18 and I retired at 42. I've been fortunate to be in 40 or 50 countries in my life, and I deployed to the Middle East quite a bit, about 62 months total time on the ground in combat. And first, the technology capabilities that you've brought to the table are different and they're powerful. And if people know how to utilize them correctly and utilize the insights that we're able to build together, I think that we're going to be able to enhance any business that we cooperate with. For the WDG initiative as a whole, particularly in the ethics, I think of, in Ukraine right now, they have drones that can identify an armed person and walk them to a site. And do we know that those drones are being contained by an individual? Or is there a decision model that allows a drone to kill someone without somebody making that approval? Those things are very scary to me. I've been on some initiatives to create some technologies that we could use the battlefield. And the goal is to remove people fighting against the people. The grander goal is, why fight at all? Why can't we fight with our minds? If my grander goal in life has been I would rather fight with my mind than with my might or with power or with technology or with weapons. If we were to give power to a machine, have we taken away the ability for us to collaborate, right? You already see things, you see robots fighting each other. Who came up with that idea? That's a horrible idea, right? I mean, it's cool for, as a kid, I definitely liked a lot of the cartoons, right? Transformers. It's a cool cartoon, but I would hate to see that. I think that we got to stay connected as people, and we need to be able to intellectually understand differences across the world and collaborate at the highest level so we can find a standard that's acceptable and beneficial to all.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Travis. I really appreciate how you thought about it. And yes, in an ideal world, we would not want people fighting, but we all know the realities that we live in. We fight in our homes sometimes, with our siblings or with people we love and so forth. So the question is, how do we create a world where there's more peace? And how do we create a world where, there's less fight? And artificial intelligence, to your point, already is being used in war across the world for drones, for example.
Yeah.
And the promise is even further now, because to your point, if robots could be created which could go and fight, which mother or father would say, oh, send my son to war because the robot can go now. So if someone was to want to pass a regulation saying, oh, no more humans sent to war, robots will go, that's likely to happen. And if every country was to pass that law, I don't think any country is going to want to not pass that law, because everybody's going to support that. And if that happens, guess what do we have? We already have robots fighting robots, like you said. And if robots are fighting robots, that's great, because, no humans' lives are being lost. But then how would you then ensure control that these robots are not fighting in a place, don't turn into humans, or they don't fight in a place where humans are getting impacted, collateral damage of war? So how are we going to ensure that these things happen? And I think there was a conversation to be had there. And to your point, artificial intelligence definitely presents a promise where people can have the fight of minds, if you will, and get more witty and outdo each other intellectually. Mr. James Cameron, I'd like to thank him for creating some great movies, Avatar, which I call the Tree of Souls. So there's definitely the Tree of Souls future that's ahead for us. That's a possibility. Or, of course, Mr. Cameron also created Terminator. So there's the Terminator future. I watched a little-known documentary called We Need to Talk About AI. It's on Netflix, where Mr. Cameron says maybe the purpose of humans was simply to give birth to the child of the machine age. And it's pretty scary when he says that.
It is.
But at the same time, we could think of maybe the purpose of AI is to help us transcend our biology. Imagine firefighters who are volunteers, right? Much like the WDG folks who are volunteers here. If they popped a pill and their biology was better and they were more fire resistant, wouldn't that be a nicer bird?
That'd be amazing, right? Just to think about the enhancements that we could have in the medical community as a whole through AI is pretty promising. We're already seeing some amazing advancements. This is after me coming out of 20 years of war. I spent over 5 years during the 20-year war in combat. It's quite a bit. And the technological advancement that we made in that time was mind-blowing. We were afraid not to be in war every third year. Our promotion potential would decrease because we'd lose access to the technological advancement, right? So I was always trying to get back to it because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to see more. I wanted to know how it was done. Right? I really, really, really enjoyed it. And I'm thankful for the military on that. The greater good. How do we do these things for the greater good without creating a proxy war, or without finding some big sandbox in some other country and just throwing everything at it to see what comes of it, right? Over a few bad people. That's something I think about a lot. So, if we can kick off this initiative, and if you're listening, we'd really just love to, like he talked about, you CEOs, board of advisors, C-level executives that want to be a part of this initiative. Just like Wikipedia, right? We have a small startup, $100 a month fee. We really want to do this for the greater good. We've organized a pretty amazing team, but as you know, right, there's 8 billion people in the world. We need as many people as we can to join us on this initiative to truly make an impact across the world. And it starts with us and you, and none of us are good enough. We need you to be a part of this initiative so we can truly move this ball forward.
Travis, thank you. It was a great conversation.